Welcome, everybody. We're glad to have this time to meet with everyone. And we have kind of a hybrid meeting for us, first we've done for a while. We appreciate your patience and our technical astuteness here will be challenged. I've changed some things in this room as we get in it. So anyway, and so grateful that you personally can come and meet. It really helps us as presenters and helps us to interact with you and to have the questions. And even though when we timed our presentation, it was only about 90 minutes. So we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. And so we wanted that to be interactive today. Now, we ask that those of you in this room, because we are using the system here to do the video over the internet for everybody on the Zoom meeting. So do not have your speakers on and your mic, so you don't have to be on the Zoom meeting being here. That's probably better, because if you're on the speakers or the mic, it's gonna be, we'll get some feedback. So just turn those off if you want to be on the Zoom meeting or what have you. Now, and then we will have, this is being recorded, so it will be available on our website. And Charity's really good at turning this around and it'll be for first part next week. So happy to do that. And so we're, with that, I think we'll.
I want to make one other comment is for those of you in the room, the speakers are super sensitive. So if you're moving papers or having side conversations, it will pick those up for those who are listening on Zoom. So just be aware of that. We will have breaks and we can have conversation at the end. And so just be aware, sometimes those listening on Zoom, if you have those side conversations, they can't hear your presentation. So be aware of that. Thank you.
Appreciate it again. So we're happy that you're here to interact with us. Appreciate that. Okay, so with that, I think we can get started. And we are going to be monitoring the chat. So you that are online, we will be monitoring the chat and getting those questions. So as we go through here today, our agenda was kind of laid out in the newsletter, but basically I'm going to be presenting or showing the results of the July submissions you did for the statistical report. We did send it out to everyone, but we weren't sure how many would start. And so we'd just like to welcome everybody. Come on in and make yourselves at home. We got some more folks coming in. Apologize, I probably need to just, those of you that are here in the meeting do not need to be on Zoom, but you're welcome to. But if you are or connect on the Zoom, we would love to have you not turn your mics and your speakers off, because we're using the system in this build in this to recording and do the internet feed out to everyone else. So there are microphones. You'll see the little green dots in their ceiling here. That's the microphones, and they'll pick up a lot of sound. So kind of set as quietly as you can. And if someone online, they let us know if we need to repeat anything. But so turn your sound, your mics off, and I'll hear your speakers so we don't get a feedback loop. So today, appreciate you being here. Some kind of our last phase of House Bill 250 requirements are being looked at this year. There's lots of things that need to maybe be considered that. And I'm the one that's got the phone on. And this is Carrie Reese. Why don't you help Carrie out? Okay. So anyway, so we will, so happy to take the chat. The chat, we've got someone here to monitor just the chat. So we will take questions from you on the web feed through the chat. I'm happy to have that. So, and let us know what we can do. And so we're going to talk about the metrics. So July, everyone had to do an extra report this year due to House Bill 80. And so we gathered those numbers. We had some great feedback, and we'll go through those numbers with you. We do have the individual LEA numbers, but I didn't send them out because I wasn't sure how many would want to adjust it. Come October, you do have a chance to adjust it here. But if you think you're done, one and done, then I'm happy to send those out to you, and we'll just kind of get some feedback on that from everyone. And today I want 2 reports, same time period out floating. If one's kind of a prelim and one was a final. But so we have those submissions, we'll talk about those. Charity has been working on the 2021-22 certificate compliance reporting. We're a little late in the month, that's gonna be next weekend. We'll be sending those out, so we'll talk about, not much to change that way, but we'll walk everybody through, because we know often we have a lot of new principles and so forth in that process. We wanna make sure that everybody kind of understands that. So Charity's gonna walk through that process of the reporting. I'm gonna talk a little bit about fee schedules. We've had a lot of feedback on those lately and from parents and others, and so I want to go through fee schedules, what those mean. Textbooks, this is the biggest change this year, is the criteria on the textbooks, and there'll be no charging fees for that. We'll go through very detailed what that means, what the definitions are, what the rule means, and jump in that. We're gonna talk about school fees funding uses, as there's another part with the legislative changes, the delayed part of the House Bill 80 implementation, and we'll talk about that regarding the school fees funding uses. Then we'll talk about monitoring. What are we as a school fees team? What are our plans? What are we developed to do for our monitoring? And then we'll also end with a Q&A session. But please interrupt us as we go, because if you have a question, somebody else has probably got a question too. And so, and that goes for that chat too. Jen's here to help us. She's going to kind of raise her hand, and so we'll go there. And so today, my name is Tamara Daly, and I kind of been leading this project for the last 2 years. I have with me Charity Goodfellow, which many of you know because she's kind of the voice on the phone, picks up a lot of the questions and inquiries from you all, and she will assist us. And we're missing one of our colleagues today, so we're having to pick up her piece. She had a medical emergency last night, so we'll without her, but we're gonna, she makes great notes, and so we're gonna just slide by, no hiccup at all. So anyway, and so with that, any other questions about just logistics, and everybody's good on the online feed? So we're all good to go? Okay, so let's just jump in, talk about the performance metrics. Okay, so it was a pandemic year. There was some talk, well, what should we report it or not? But we went ahead and collected the data anyway. And because we'd already kind of set it up the year before and whatnot, we'll go for it. We actually had overall throughout statewide, $83 million in school fees collected for all statewide. And that was a growth of about 4.4 million, or about 5.6%. Now, with that, we have about 39 LEAs that say reported that they do not charge fees. And then we had another 6 that said they reported fees, but then put 0 on their fee schedule because they made that judgment for the pandemic year. So that gives you kind of idea. Now, we realize that this is like the second year into this big push about school fees. And so we realize there's still a lot of getting adjustments and some adjustments being made in there. So of the 117 LEAs that reported school fee amounts to us, 110 had curricular fees, 7 of them had co-curricular fees, and then the 94 charged extracurricular fees with that. And so why did we do this exercise? And so we talk about this exercise, and it was all House Bill 80. The legislators wanted to be informed about what the fees were and what they were being used for. And so that's went forward. And so 54 million is kind of a combined curricular, co-curricular. Now, some of you will remember there was also a general category. I threw the general category in with the curricular, okay? That was very small, but a lot of put like their participation fees or their locker fees, it's kind of some general things in that. So we had 54 million overall for the school fees. Now, what did we do with that number? Well, I had a phone call like July 2nd as to what that number was, because the Utah Association of Superintendents and Board Officers wanted to know what that was, because they wanted to get prepared for the bill file. And so we put them off for a couple of days because we had to clean up some numbers, and we had some that were a little strange, so we cleaned those up. So we got it pretty well sanitized. It's not perfect, but it was pretty well sanitized. And so we came up with a 54 million that was given to them. I've used, that number is also used, and a legislative report has been done, and I believe it's in the works getting up to the legislators. But that 54 million is part of that. And I believe that's going to be used in the business case we're asking the legislators this year for a bill file to fund that, or say, go out and fund that. So that's the amount. Jen, I'll look to you. I don't know if Angie is on. I know she said she had another meeting. And it's actually the sync meeting, the committee meeting for that. So anyway, I'll leave that, and I'm happy to, so that is in the works, and the business case is being made for legislators. Okay, so next, let's talk about fee waivers. We had the total fee waivers between the curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular. 10% of curricular fees are typically waived, but only 4%. There's the breakdown between the charters and districts. Of course, the district's going to overpower so much bigger. It's going to be the statewide number, but districts are a little higher in waiving the fees. They were closer to last year's than this year's because we only had 6.2 million that was waived this year, and so that's, when we talk about school fees and regulations, you know, the 407, the 537G Part 5, all are about, you know, kind of putting some boundaries around school fees and what schools, LEAs do with that. But it's also about primarily the must or the requirements for the fee waivers themselves. And so I just wanted to kind of remind you that that's what we're kind of working with. So we did have this drop in fee waivers from year to year. And here's some amounts, year-to-year comparison now. So the school year 2021, there was about 75,000 students that we thought were eligible. Now, we talk about student eligibility in these reports. It's an estimate. We use the economically disadvantaged from the UTREC system to do that. We come up with a percentage of students, and then we apply that percentage to the secondary students to come up with it. It's an estimate. It's not a one-to-one match, but it's the closest thing we could come up with as to what we thought would be students that should be, or, you know, eligible for fee waivers. And so we've dropped, last year, the number of participating fee waivers was at 51%. This year it just dropped below 49%. But there's probably some reasons for that due to the pandemic year. And part of that was that we had reported to us that a lot of schools just said, I'm not going to collect school fees. So it wasn't that they didn't report them as waivers, because they just wrote them off for everybody. And we had that reported back to us. So that some impact this number. So we realize there's some noise in these numbers.
I think the big part is with the lunch also, because all the lunch breakfasts were free this year. So maybe people will fund an incentive to fill those ones.
Yeah, we had heard that the lunch, they didn't have to have the lunch applications, and so why fill out a fee waiver application? Anyway, yeah, so there's a lot of moving parts for this past year, but just so it was kind of, you know, it went down a little bit. But I just want to remind you, why do we do this? Why do we create these reports? And this gets back into the dialogue of whether or not you have to, when Cherry talks about certificate of compliance, do you need to correct them? These numbers don't, they're right here. They stay at USB. We don't report them to feds. They are for your use, for you to see a measurement and of how we can do, or where we're at, where we can go, or we can improve. And so, and I, you know, Lord Kelvin, of course, many in business are familiar with, he said, if you can't measure it, you can't measure it, you can't improve it. That's what school's all about, grades. How do we do? How do we improve? We're always looking at measurements, and we want to make sure that we kind of apply that also into the fees and fee waivers. All right, so with that, this is just the last slide on the measurements. And so what does that boil down to? Basically, this is the slide you're all familiar with. This gives the state and the charter of the districts. And so we have the count of the K through 12, of course, you're all familiar, about 650,000. Economically disadvantaged, which we pick up with the EU tracks, is about 156. So we figure that about 24% of the students statewide, 22 in the charters, 24 in the districts, should be eligible. We apply that to the secondary school enrollment. And so that tells us that there should be about, you know, the students that are actually on fee waivers, like 12%, and we think that it should be closer up to 24%. So if we were to take that, just, you know, like I say, it's not a one-to-one measurement, but it's really close. And so with that, So these are reports that we sent out last March, first time. I've got them ready to go out this time. We can send with the July numbers, or we'll wait and go, I was gonna wait and go with the October numbers. If anybody changes your numbers, you don't have to change your numbers. When Charity will talk more about that. So anyway, with that, are there any questions? That's kind of my spiel about the reports and what we've been doing with those. So, and like I said, I'm happy to send out the July numbers, which gives you your LEA and the state comparison if you would like. Happy to do that. Or if you're a charter, I can do it with the charter numbers, whichever. Okay, any questions?
Should we request it, or will you be able to send it to us?
I can just send it to you. I apologize. I know I sat down with you in a meeting.
You have Academy.
Yeah, okay. I can get that. All right. Anything? Okay, all right. With that, I'm going to turn time to Charity to chat. Want this or
On, I'm good.
you good?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Yeah, you're good. Thanks, Tammy. So yeah, we're tag teaming it. So seriously, if you guys have questions or whatever, and with our other coworker not here, hopefully it'll go just as smoothly. I get the fun part, certificate of compliance. I know this is something all of you absolutely love. Every year you're required to submit the information. And so a couple of things I wanted to go over. It's the same thing every year, same as last year. We submitted it through Qualtrics. Because we are going to be putting this online, I wanted to give you the email that those links are going to be coming from. So we had some issues with IT departments rejecting the emails because it's a mass distribution from Qualtrics. And so just make sure you check with your IT departments that this email is being received from their servers. And so just the no reply at qemailserver.com. And so the PowerPoint will be there. So if you forget, you don't write it down, you can pull it up online, send that to them, okay? But everybody will receive it from them. The links are sent to the superintendents and the charter directors, the board chairs, and the principals. So all principals will receive that. I know that we have some charters that they're in one location, but they have a principal that's over their secondary, and then there's a principal over the middle schools and a principal over the elementary schools. Each one of those principals does receive a link, and each one of those principals is required to send that certificate of compliance submission. So, and then one thing that we're going to do a little bit different than we have done in the past years is we're also going to send out the notification to the school fees contacts and the business administrators that those links have been distributed. I know that's been an issue of not knowing when they've gone out, what's been happening. So we're trying to improve our communications with that. Just make sure everybody is aware. You guys can all work together to make sure these are submitted on time. We will still have our 15-day reminder. So if we haven't received a certificate of compliance on the 15th, we will send out the reminders to the superintendent and then the school fee contacts and the business administrator saying, hey, this is who we have not received a link from. Please follow up with them. And so we just want to make sure that everybody submits them by the 31st. The 31st does fall on a Sunday. We are aware of that. Currently, we are still going to close it at 5 p.m. on the 31st. The survey is set up to do that. We double checked everything they said right now. That's what we're going to go with. If you have a complication with that, there's something that has come up, you're not able to submit it, reach out to us. Okay. I have to go in and change how Qualtrics is set up, but the goal is to have it submitted by the 31st. So please be aware of that. Questions? No?
That's of October.
October 31st. So the links will go out October 1st. So that's next Friday. Those will be distributed, hopefully morning is what we're planning on. We'll send the notifications out to the school fee contacts and the business administrators that same day. And then the 31st is when the report closes online. Okay. Based off of all the changes, you guys, we've gone through the training, we have reviewed and consolidated, revised the certificate of compliance based on risk. And so we went through, and if you'll notice, some of you have been working with your CPAs. The state compliance guide has been updated. And so you are now required to submit information to your CPAs about the certificate of compliance with school fees. And with our understanding of what's been happening. We went through each of the questions because last year I believe there were 26. We have now condensed that down to 15. The first 5 questions will be, is this going to the right person? Is it going to the right LEA? If not, it'll kick you out. It'll send us a notification and then we can reach out to you to make sure it's going to the right individual. Sometimes you have those principal changes this time of the year. Some things weren't settled. We tried to do that with our verification list to make sure that we had everything good. So this is our final, let's make sure we're on the same page, everything's going out to the right person. Then we have our code and rule assurance. Do you know and understand the code, the rule, and the permanent injunction? And then you have the attestation. Are you charging school fees or not? That's the big one that we ask for. So if you say no, you don't charge school fees, you sign the certificate and you're done. Those 5 questions, okay? The next one, if you say yes, then you have the additional attestations if you're abiding by these regulations. I've put the little numbers on the side. That's how many questions in each section. So you have 1 board approval, 3 for the fee schedule, 2 on fee waivers, 1 on fundraising, 1 on donations. Training, is your LEA receiving training? It is slightly different how the questions are asked if you're a superintendent and charter director and a board chair versus a principal. So it's identified for what you are overseeing. And then the last one, if you have elementary grades that you are overseeing, then that question will pop up. If you are just secondary, you will not get that final question, okay? At that point, if you're a board chair or a principal, it'll kick you out. You sign the certificate, yes, everything is correct, and you're done. This is the email sample of it. I put my name in here. And so this is what it'll look like. So again, you'll notice at the top, I know it's kind of small. Again, it'll be posted online, but it's coming from that qemailserver.com. And so, and it'll say, hey, this is what it's for. Here's the survey. Click on this link. And then this is what will open up. And it'll have principals or board chairs and continue, and that will drop you right into the survey. So this is the process. So you can see that. If you are a superintendent or a charter director or helping out a superintendent or charter director, you're going to ask this first question. We're required to submit the statistical data on July 1st. Do you have any updates to that submission? If you say no, it'll bump you to, okay, please attach these additional required documents. If you say yes, it will pull up the report that you had in July. So it'll look exactly the same. We still have the documents online. So we had a sample of what that was, that statistical report, as well as the definitions. That is still on that certificate of compliance tab. And so you can pull that up. If you need to provide updates, then you will have to do a complete resubmission of the numbers. So it's not just, oh, hey, this number's updated and this one. You've got to go back in and resubmit that whole report. So then we can just go in and say, okay, these are the exact numbers for you. Once you submit that information, it will pull you out and ask you for the additional required documents. So there's the 3 things that are required by rule. You have to submit the fee schedule, the LEA fee policy, and the LEA fee waiver policy. We are asking you to label them specifically this year, just for the back end. It's a little bit easier for us to keep track of whose file belongs to what. Yes?
In our case, they have combined 1 document.
Perfect. So all you need to do is you'll have the LEA name, the year, and then where this has fee schedule, you can put fee schedule, policy, waiver policy. So it's all tied into that name of that file. That way it identifies to us, you have 1 attachment or you're going to have multiple attachments. So that if there's one that we're missing and you put in there that it's only fee schedule, then we know that we need to reach out to you to get the policies. And so it just makes it a little bit easier. We have a question online.
If we have a change in the fee schedule, do we have to do the other policies if they have not changed?
So let me reiterate. So the question is, if you had a fee schedule and you've got your fee policy and the fee waiver policy, but then you had a change in the fee schedule and you're going to resubmit that, do you have to resubmit the policies based off of what you submitted last year or for this year?
I think it's for this year. It doesn't specify.
Okay, because it has to be resubmitted every year. So even if your policy has not changed from year to year, we still do have to have that information submitted every single year.
So just to clarify then, if you have one of those 3 items that has changed, but the other 2 items that you've already submitted in July have not changed, the schedule, the policy didn't change, but the waiver policy did, do you want them to resubmit the schedule and the policy that did not change as well as the waiver policy?
Yes, because I don't think we had them submit it in July, because it would have been last October.
And I don't know, so
Yeah,
I'm
you're
just
good.
trying to help.
You're good. Thanks for clarification. I'm gonna grab water really quick. But yeah, because all of these would have been submitted last October. Only in July we received the statistical data numbers. And so if the fee schedule changed between last October and this October, absolutely. Fee policy, even if they didn't change, they still need to submit it just because it's a yearly basis. Okay. Again, this is found online, statistical data definitions, all drawn out, so if you do need to do a definition, it's there. Pretty clear on the certificate of compliance, again, it's the fun part. No, yes?
So just to clarify, each of the principals at each location would fill in their own assurance document, and then there's one that will go to the superintendent?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, so if you are a charter and you are acting as the director and a principal, you will only receive the director attestation
Gotcha.
because you are acting as both. And so, but there's locations where they have a director and then there's 3 principals, even though it's 1 location. And so all 4 of those individuals would need to submit their own attestation. Yeah, so we're aware the differences between how the charters run and how it goes. We kind of figured that out last year, but yes.
So I'm at the same school. If the director submitted the reporting in July and the 3 principals each get that survey, what data will they see?
They're not going to see any data.
Okay,
So the principal certificate does not have any of that statistical report, anything even attached to it. And so when you get the link, because it's personalized for each individual as to what they oversee. And so the superintendent and charter director, they'll have the questions and then they'll have a different section that is for that statistical report that'll pull up if you're submitting updates. The principals don't even have that. So they go through all the questions. If they do an elementary school, they'll answer that and then they're done. They sign it, they've completed it and they're out. And so there's no overlap with them even seeing information or knowing what is submitted on the superintendent or director side.
how do we make sure you've got the correct contact? We've had a change from
Had a
July
change,
1 at our.
Notify us, because we did send out in August, we said, hey, please let us know, this is the information that we have. If you've had changes since then, yeah, if you've had changes, please let us know so we can get out. Again, if we miss something, if we don't catch it and it goes to the wrong person, because it'll pull up on the certificate of compliance and you'll notice there are samples posted online on the website. So you can pull those up and there's a sample for the board chair, for the superintendent director and the principals. But that very first question is this report is intended for this person. Is this correct? If it's not, it'll send you to another question, say, please enter the correct information. And then you would put in who it is. That would come to us and then we would reach out to you saying this. It does the same thing for the LEA. This is intended for this LEA. Is this correct? If it's not, it'll kick you to another page. Please enter in the correct information. So that way we're aware of where it went and where it should be going. And then we can make sure everything is correct. Question?
Online question, do we submit links to the fee schedule and policies or copies of the documents?
So currently how it's built is you are able to attach a file with the way that you can upload that information. And so, yeah, there won't be a link for us to click in. It is just an actual file that you will be uploading to Qualtrics. And that's where we ask for the specific file names. Yes.
Elementary school related, so we are opening elementary next year, not this year, but if you are charging like those fee, that considered as a fee and then you are bound to elementary school, yes, we charge fee or?
It is a fee. So even after school elementary programs. So if there's no fees during the regular school day, or you have the supplemental kindergarten or an after-school program, yes, you charge fees. And so then you would have to go through the full attestation with the elementary school of saying, yes, we're abiding by all of these requirements, because all of those, the supplementary kindergarten, the after-school activities, all have to follow 407. And so if there's students that are on fee waivers, you're sending them the fee waiver forms, you're sending them the policies, it all applies for any fees. Any other questions? No? Okay. Did you want to do the fee schedule, or do you want me to?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll jump into the fee schedule. Tammy, if you have comments, feel free. Again, you guys, go ahead and ask us any questions as we go through this. This was the section that Barbie had, so we'll hopefully have good notes from her on this. The one thing we wanted to go over is what the fee schedule includes in code. Trying to take this back to code as much as possible, because this is what the legislature has approved. So refresher, a lot of you know this information already, but you have fee schedule has to include a specific amount. If you have an activity that has multiple fees, you have to have a easy to understand delineation. That means something that parents can look at and know that these fees all total up to this other fee within an activity. Fee waiver policy should be part of the fee schedule. It should be continuous. So you have your fee schedule and you have your fee waiver policy that parents receive when you send that out to them with the registration materials, okay? And then your corresponding spend plan. You know, spending plan, it was a big change. And a lot of you have done amazing at your spend plans and at making it easy and understand for parents to know exactly where those funds are being used for those activities. So that's the requirement in code, are those 4 different things. And then what was the other one that I missed?
Svk Amounts.
Yeah, so the specific amount for each fee, the delineation, and the fee total. Yes.
Now, specific amounts, as good as we can, like we do in the schedule, and they are approved. Sometimes some changes are there in the field. For example, it says entry fee to a place. The entry fee, we know is $15, let's say, but that place later changed that fee to the $17.
That's where you submit to change the fee schedule. So
like, see my point, right? Like fee schedule is adopted, let's say in October, submitted, everything done,
right.
but an event is scheduled in April. And just like a week or 2 weeks before the event, you learn days that you are going to actually change their fee. So,
you do have to reopen for an amendment with the fee schedule, something like that, and it has to go through the whole process again. And so with those places that are the outside that impact your fee schedule like that.
A good example is, let's say, you know, a club is designing a t-shirt for themselves, and you know that you charge it $15, but company has put in $17. Then you have to go back and.
Yep. The other thing that we have seen is, and this is where the code and the rule are a little bit different, because the rule says a maximum. You list the maximum amount on the fee schedule, and the code says a specific amount. Okay, we understand there's a difference there. So what some LEAs have been doing is they've been listing, okay, here is our maximum. So you would set it at $20. For this item, the parents aren't going to charge more than $20. Then you come in and it's only 17 or 15, you're fine. You don't need to amend the fee schedule. You don't need to change anything, because you are charging less than that maximum amount. So if you know there may be something like that where it's going to be really close, you're not sure, you can put on the fee schedule, this is the maximum amount. And that's, you just cannot charge over that. If it comes back and they're saying, oh, hey, now it's 25 and you approve that 20, you do need to amend the fee schedule, have the 2 public meetings, go through the process. Yes.
So obviously with a 2-week notice, you wouldn't have time to amend your fee schedule. The school could opt to just pay the difference.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. And you just, okay, we can't charge that to parents. It's not approved on the fee schedule. Here's what we're going to cover of this. But yeah, you cannot pass that on to parents if it has not gone through.
And then your activity report would show that your expenses are higher than your fees.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay. This is that maximum fee amount. We have an example here. So going with soccer, that delineation. Soccer is $305. I know, which screen to point at. So you have your 305, which is your total right here. Then you have your breakdown of each one. Here's the participation fee, uniform, safety equipment, shoes, travel. Each one of those has a specific amount of what this is for. Then you have your spend plan that lists what that is being spent on, okay? It also has to include any required group fundraising. And so that is part of the total. Out of parents will know coming in, okay, fundraising will cover about $250 of this. So they may only have to pay $55 for that out of pocket. You just want to make sure that it's clear, that parents understand this. Yes.
What happens at the fundraiser? You make
Okay, that should be on that fee schedule.
No, I'm saying, is
Well,
you say it's gonna make 250 and it doesn't make 250, then out-of-pocket maximum is not gonna be 55.
Right, it is
It's
gonna
gonna
be
be
more.
more than that.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
I think I think what we're trying to emphasize here, that when you state the out-of-pocket maximum 55, that's what it is. I mean, you have other funds that you would have to go into, but you can't go into school fees or charge parents more unless it is on the schedule as such.
In other words, you would estimate your fundraiser low. And if you made more,
$10.
then the max could be less,
Yeah,
but you would estimate your fundraiser low. So, I mean, you're trying to be as transparent as possible, but you
Yeah.
also don't want to get yourself in a bind.
right, and that's so true, yes.
You have to, sorry, do you have to put an out-of-pocket maximum on there?
If you were trying to do all the, if there is expectation that there would be an out-of-pocket or a cash payment other than the fundraising, I would certainly want to state that.
So you could put the same amount as the total fees of $305, knowing that if they don't do any fundraising, they're gonna pay.
And I think that there's that idea and the clarity, the transparency to parents, that not only do we expect you maybe pay a little cash, we all expect you to show up on 3 or 4 Saturdays and do, 5 or 6 hours of fundraising, or, and that's what they're trying to get out front and told to parents.
And then the uniforms, can the uniforms not include the cleats and you have to break the uniform out?
This one is good, I would like it, but no, because the uniform or the activity clothing would be all one type of expenditure, and it says the breakout only needs to be by type. So travel does need to be separate than.
Yeah, so we've got
clothing, but yeah.
participation,
this is a lot of
uniforms,
detail.
spirit gear, and travel.
Yeah.
If we went this detailed, we're gonna end up with a 10-page.
And you could list, so the uniform here, you could have it be, okay, it's $90. And then your spend plan says shirts, shorts, socks, soccer cleats. Yeah, and that would be fine. We have an online question.
We actually have two, so I'm going to start with Kim's question first. Is the participation fee the same as the program sustainability fee?
Those are defined by the LEA. And so I know that there is a specific participation fee to the Athletic Association, but no, the LEAs are defining what these fees mean, what they are.
And that, a lot of that has to depend on, okay, where are those expenses going to? So who are they paying to make sure that? Oh, but yeah, that is up to LEAs as to how they determine that.
Okay, second question. This question is, I thought we could not require participation in fundraisers. So can you speak a little bit about participation in fundraisers?
Yes, so I will mention real quick, we just recently posted a document online about fundraisers. And so that is on our FAQ guidance tab on the website. It's a great document. We did pull from outside regulations over fundraising that we reference in the document if what you're doing does not apply with school fees, okay? So there are additional resources there. Fundraising, you can require group fundraising. With that, what you bring in must benefit that team, that activity, that organization, or that event that you are raising the funds for, okay? With the required group fundraising, you must be very clear on what the requirements are. So you've got to have that meeting with parents. You've got to let them know time requirements. Hey, this is the expected amount we want to bring in, but these are the hours. So you can require hours, not an amount. The permanent injunction specifically is against those quotas. So you cannot say, hey, all students need to bring in $50. You can say, hey, all students need to participate for 2 hours, okay? Now, there are families that may have other things going on that maybe they can't be there for the time that you set for that fundraiser. What other opportunities are you giving for them to put in those 2 hours? So maybe they can help with, you know, the paperwork behind the scenes, so they can't be there for those 2 hours at the actual activity at the car wash or whatever it is, okay? But they can help make posters, they can help get things ready for that fundraising activity in order to show that they have participated for that required group fundraiser. You have a question?
So when it comes to the funds themselves, the group fundraiser, all of those individuals would be working towards a collective amount, right? And that all of that would then be pooled for the program? Or can it be set up for the individual? So for instance, if that kid goes out and sells 20 pizza cards or whatever and raises $200 to offset that individual's fee, but then the other kid only sells $6 worth. Does it matter, or does it have to collectively be pooled into soccer? Does that make sense?
You're good. Group fundraising should benefit the group as a whole. Then you have your individual fundraisers, okay? Where you have a student who's trying to raise money for themselves. Those you cannot require, but they can go out and do additional fundraising to offset their own fees to take care of that. So let's say the fundraiser only brings in half the amount that you're hoping, okay? So your goal was 10,000, you bring in 5,000. So among all the students, there's still 5,000 owed. Each student is $150 to $200. You have a student who is like, okay, I want to go and I want to do my own fundraising to cover that extra $150, $200. They can. You can provide those opportunities for them. You cannot require it though.
Charity, do we have to account for that in the schedule anywhere? Like if they do optional fundraising, like do we have to account for that anywhere?
There is a fundraising account separate. If you're doing the individual fundraising, you know, those funds are actually probably going to be applied to the student and applied to his fee account. But the group fundraising should just be applied, you know, to the activity revenue, to that revenue the same.
But for
And it would be an
optional individual fundraising, we don't have to put that anywhere in a fee schedule or any documentation.
No.
There's no requirement there.
Okay.
For best practice, I would say you could state optional individual fundraising available. And that's it. Yeah. Yes.
So this is required, but if you have a non-required group fundraiser, can it benefit just those kids that show up?
For a non-required group fundraiser,
Because, you know, because as you say, if you don't require it, it says, hey, here's an opportunity for you to earn some money. So is it benefit the group, or is that something in the policy, your own policy of the school district, charter school? Can you state that and say, hey, can we, you know, if you have a non-required group fundraiser, whoever shows up, we're going to split it among you guys.
so the way that it is in code right now, required group fundraising is considered a fee, okay?
Well,
Non-required, so it doesn't follow the same type of regulations where it needs to be split by the group and benefit everybody. So yes, if you're going to do it, have a policy.
Okay, so the policy can determine what happens with those non-required. group
Correct, and that
fundraisers.
is up to the LEA control. Yes.
Isn't by definition a group fundraiser benefits everyone? So it wouldn't be group if it's just benefiting individuals?
Great point.
Yeah,
That is a great point.
Just call it an individual fundraiser.
Yeah. So, but
Having a
there's,
policy.
because it's not required, and it's, hey, if you guys want to, you can come and show up, this is what happens. Have a policy that is absolutely clear. Parents know, if you're gonna refer to it as a group fundraiser, you gotta let them know this is what this means. Otherwise, call it an individual fundraiser. Call it what it is your best practice. Yeah, 1 second. We'll do the online question real quick.
Well, there's actually kind of a lot. I think just to clarify, if the student doesn't participate in a group fundraiser, does it still have to benefit the student who does not participate? So if it's a group fundraiser, it goes to the group, correct?
It does.
So it would benefit all students who are part of that group, whether or not they participate in the group fundraiser. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
And that is correct. The funds have to go to benefit the entire activity or something. But you have an ability that that student can, you know, it's hard in an event, but it's like a practice. You can teach leadership skills. Like if that's a group fundraiser for the football to go buy equipment and somebody doesn't show up and it's required that he's there for whatever reason, well, it's just like if he doesn't show up to practice, maybe he doesn't get as many minutes on the field. You guys are gonna have to kind of, these are subjective. It kind of, there's so many, it depends with all of this, and it's somewhat subjective. But yes, the funding must go or treat the activity as a whole in the group fundraising, required group fundraising. But you can have individual consequences for not, you know, participating in the group fundraising.
And I do want to mention real quick, the document that we have online talks about LEAs being able to for students if they don't participate in these required group fundraisers. If you are going to have consequences like that, you must be explicitly clear with your parents, okay? Because otherwise, if you do not communicate and you have this requirement with a group fundraiser and a student or parents feel that, oh, I don't support that, I don't care if my kid participates, and then the kid shows up for the activity and then they're told that day that they can't participate, because there is not that communication. They need to know if they did not participate, this is the consequence, okay? You've got to have that clear as day. You've got to have those policies in place, and you have to have met with those parents. They understand the time frame. They understand what this is for. And so, because we've already had several calls coming in regarding ones like that. And so we want to make sure that this is changed and you are clear, because if you are not, then there's a consequence to that student, and now it's affecting other aspects of the role of your withholding participation because you have not been explicit in what is happening with those requirements. Jen, another question.
Yeah, so there are kind of a lot. Let me just get back. I think this goes, I'm going to clarify for Alex, but I don't know for sure if this is what the question is. The question is, where do dances, yearbooks, and student trips like skiing or lagoon fit into this? I think that was at the time we were talking about categorization or types of fees, but I'm not 100% sure, and I'm hoping that Alex will jump on real quick and let me know if that's right.
Now, Alex, add some clarification as to if you're referring, if to that applies with fundraising or fees in general. Because that's different answer depending on the question. You had another question, or did we answer?
You kind of talked about it, but I think she has a question kind of going on. One question I do have, and this leads to what you were just talking about. With group fundraisers, you know, they can be required and they go, and it has to benefit the group as a whole. Can it be divided out to all team members, a certain amount, everybody getting the same amount? Instead of staying in this account, can it be applied to their fees in the same amount, every person?
Because the group benefits the same.
Okay.
So yes.
So, but if a kid didn't participate,
Still benefits.
Still gets it.
that's what I'm saying. But then just a minute ago, you were saying there could be
No.
consequences.
Well,
If I was doing this, okay, I would say, here's the cost of the activity, okay? And we think we're gonna have this much money that comes in for general funds, we can apply this, if you get 5 accounts, you got local funding, you got federal dollars, you can't use federal dollars for most of this, but anyway, you've got a couple of buckets of funding sources. And school fees, you know, what I would do is I would lower the cost, or the income from group fundraising decreases the overall cost. Then I need to go out and ask for school fees. So now, let's say if you didn't do any fundraising, it was $1,000, okay? When you do fundraising, so you collect enough that you only have to charge 200 in fees. Well, then the fee becomes 200. It's no longer 1,000, it's 200. So, you know, you gotta think of the group fundraising, it's just a revenue source you take off the top, if you will. And then the fees are all lowered. Everybody else's fees are then out of pocket are lowered. Now,
It's just hard because fundraisers are so unpredictable
yeah,
that it's hard to, you know, like on our fee sheets to put that so clearly and concise.
Yeah.
Because school fees, it's not like a district budget where you know exactly how much you get. It's just very, you know, depends on how much they get out and work, and it depends on the year, and it depends on a lot of things. So it's just a little bit harder.
Okay,
Goes
I know
along
we've
with
got a bunch. We're gonna do one online and then we're gonna jump back and get you guys, okay?
Okay, then I'm going to combine two into one. Okay, so we have a couple of questions in regards to that group fundraising again. The one question is schools have group fundraisers to raise money to go on trips to Washington DC and other places. They have trouble with students not showing up for fundraisers. And then the other side of that is if there are kids that are like rich kids that are providing enough money to go on a trip through an individual fundraising, but then there are the poor kids who want to participate. They go to these group fundraising things, but they can't raise enough money. Who goes on the trip?
Great, I know, great dilemmas, like, and great questions.
And I just want to put in one little other thing. You guys talk about policies and procedures, and in my experience within internal audit and answering hotlines, your policies and procedures are going to just cover your tail. I mean, they will tell the school what is expected, they'll tell the parent what's expected. And if it's well-written, then both sides have something that they can go to. A parent can go to that and say, this is what I expect out of the school. And the school can go to that and say, this is what I expect out of the parent. And that way then everyone knows and you don't have questions or arguments or bad communication.
Thanks, Jen.
That's my little.
Which is very true, is it does come down, because you guys, within your LEA, you know your families, you know the circumstances that you're dealing with and the situations that you have to figure out. And yes, you have to abide by certain regulations and you have to make sure that if you're doing required group fundraising, everybody's benefit. But if you have individuals that are not participating in these required group fundraisers, you can limit their participation. Funding is a little bit different, but their participation can be limited. Okay, we'll get back to you in just a minute. We had 2 questions over here.
Well, this one kind of relates.
Okay,
Can the consequences be monetary as far as, kind of explain what you're thinking, as far as not giving them those funds or whatever to cover stuff?
No, because
So you do the group fundraiser and you raise money for spirit packs, okay? And they actually cost $100. So the ones who participate, this is an example, the ones who participated in the fundraiser don't have to pay anything. Those that didn't have to pay $40.
Or
No.
fundraising.
Criminal injunction is particular about the money, I think.
Okay, so no monetary consequences for
No,
not
we-
participating.
you have to be careful because the group fundraising, and like you said, we've got a new document out there talking about this. It took us a few years to get it together. This is difficult. I know it is. And we had changes to the rule, and I can't see anyone here, span plan group. Oh, yeah, you were. And we worked and we talked around this, and this is hard. I don't doubt it's hard. I don't know that I can give you every answer for every situation because there's a lot of details behind all of this that if I was to come in and look at it, we got this kind of thing, it's like a continuum of risk. And so if you're going to do the group fundraisers and so forth, and you're going to decrease the cost, how much participation is, well, if you limit the participation, you're increasing the risk perhaps that someone's going to yelp out. I mean, bottom line is what we're trying to do is we're trying to limit the risk because school fees was out of a court order. It was out of, there's all sorts of things. You guys know this better than I. You've been working in schools a lot longer than I. So you got to think, what is the risk? And then also the other thing is it depends. So I don't know that we can cover every question or answer. And I will tell you, there are parts of this rule that somewhat seem to contradict others. But you gotta think, what is the best for that student's participation? Are they just flat out not participating in these group fundraisers because you gotta look for the because, we gotta look for the why. Has he got a job that he's got to go to? Has he got to do this? You guys know that better than we do. And I don't think we can lay down a rule that will, because the other kid just may not want to be part of it. You don't know. You guys know that, we don't. And so you do need to kind of consider those things a little bit. So what the rule is trying to say is that we're kind of going off in this, the pendulum has swung. We have a lot of hours required of people and parents. And they get surprised. Oh, I've got to go spend my next 8 Saturdays doing car washes. Parents don't like surprises. know, even though they want their kids to be the best football player and on the football team and all this, they don't like surprises. So we got to make sure that we can have as many students fully participating as we can. Don't let money be that barrier to them. Okay, but then we talk about what they also need, you know, so is that continuum risk. So when the group fundraising and the document goes through a lot of that, there's some rules, individual group, call it just whatever you're gonna call it, explain it well to the parents, communicate it, let them know the consequences, and hopefully the parent and kid are getting together too. It's actually showing up when he's supposed to for the fundraising. So, you know.
Okay, I want to make one real quick comment. For those online, if we don't get your question answered, we will
we
copy
will.
the chat and we will get back with you. So keep putting them in there, and even if we don't respond right now, we will get back to them. One other thing I want to follow up with Tammy is take it back to the purpose. Why are we all doing this? What is the reason? And it's to make sure that those students that are in an economic situation that they have no control over can participate in these activities. And we want to make sure that that is happening for all students, that they're able to participate. Parents know what's happening. Parents know, okay, if they want to be a part of this, these are the requirements that we have to abide by, okay? And that they can be there and they can show up. And part of these, in the injunction, it talks about how the extracurricular activities are vital to the education system that we have now. And so it's making sure that that is open and we are communicating, there's transparency with all the students. And there's no limitations to these activities and these classes for all the students. And so as you're looking at what your families are dealing with and you're writing these policies and you're bringing this together, you've got these situations, remember that, bring it in mind. And I know you guys do the majority of the time. You do, you're fantastic at taking your family situation and recognizing where they're coming from and doing what you can to make sure that things are taken care of. And it's just, you know, making sure that you've got your T's crossed and your I's dotted in the process. And every now and then we miss. And that's where it's like, hey, we caught this, let's fix it, let's change it. Nobody's perfect. We don't expect you to be, but we're just going through this process together and making it happen. Okay, we'll do an online question and then back to yours, okay?
I think we should go back to the question that we posed earlier about where those specific things fit, such as dances, yearbooks, student trips, skiing. The question was where do they fit in the fee schedule and in general. I think there's a lot that has.
No, it's great. It's great. Okay, so that's not applying with fundraising. We're taking back to the fee schedule. Awesome.
Okay,
So
that's the type of expenditure, right?
Well, that's what I thought the question was asking initially, but I think just in general, the question was, where does it fit in the fee schedule? So it's not a specific, like a dance isn't a specific type of activity with like a team, like soccer or something, but so where does it fit?
yeah, so they're saying we've got the curricular, the co-curricular, and the extracurricular categories that they're tying it into. So curricular is tied to a specific course, the core curriculum that you're tying it to. So, you know, dance is not tied to that. Co-curricular is an activity that goes along with the course. Okay, so that's your co-curricular. And then you have your extracurricular, which is just an after-school activity. So dances would fall under an extracurricular activity. And so you can have a separate section that has those types of things. Now, if you're looking at, what was another one? Yearbooks. So those are personal discretionary charges.
Those are not fees.
Yeah, those aren't fees. Yeah, it's a great idea to list it on the fee schedule so parents are aware of how much it costs, but you can have this non-waivable section because it's not a fee and doesn't need to be waived. A student doesn't have to buy the yearbook.
Okay, but a yearbook can be a fee if you sit down in school, the last day of school, and say, this instructional time, you're counting it towards your instructional time, you're saying, okay, everybody go out and sign your yearbooks. If you're giving instructional time to sign yearbooks, then the yearbook is a fee because the student has to be there, be counted as attendance, but he doesn't, and you need to provide, yearbook for him to be able to do that. So again, it kind of depends. You got to make sure you're careful with those things.
What about trips like skiing and lagoon, 9th grade lagoon day, something like that?
Extracurricular.
They're all
Extracurricular. Yeah, and so
Unless
you would,
skiing is something tied to like a skiing class.
class, like if they have a class, like you're not gonna have a class on Lagoon, I sure hope not. So, but yes, extracurricular activities. So the best way that I love to look at it is you have your courses, okay? Is it tied to a course? Is it an actual course? Is it an event linked to that course, or is it completely separate? And so then you have your curricular, your co-curricular, and your extracurricular. And then if it falls completely outside of that, then you look, okay, is it a fee? Is it not waivable? Which is your personal discretionary charge, the insurance, like parking fines, those are non-waivable. Technically, you don't have to list them on the fee schedule. Best practice, put them on your fee schedule, because parents, I'm a parent, I want to know if my kid has a parking fine, where I can pull that up and look and make sure it's good. Okay, so like that's the best practice with that. Okay, your question.
So before I ask my question, there's somebody waiting to get readmitted to the online.
Yeah, I just. saw
Okay,
that.
thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if so much of this is subjective,
Uh-huh.
if we end up and we've got all our best practices in place, we've got policies and procedures that are written, and we end up in internal audit, that audit's going to be subjective too.
Yes.
That's my frustration from the finance side.
And there's,
Later on, we're gonna be talking about textbooks. And we're gonna get into some nitty gritty on the accounting side of things. And so I think that you need to do right by your accounting, you need to do right, specific. And whether or not the student participates, if you gotta charge a fee or not charge a fee, I mean.
But that's still sometimes part of an audit.
Yes, it'll be part of monitoring, yes.
Yeah.
Because we wanna ensure that the fee waiver policies, because we wouldn't even have this rule if we didn't require fee waivers.
So if the
And,
state just
we're
funds
saying
everything,
one
then we
point,
can just
yeah.
do away with everything.
Yeah, and so, I mean, it is, I mean, the Constitution talks about, free and public education. We give the exception to secondary schools that you can go out and charge fees. And then they, give us 53G Part 7, which is school fees, and then the 407 about school fees. And I think that's the crux of it is get back to what do we need to do to deliver education, have an educational experience, but not limit or exclude anyone from that experience that we're trying to provide. And, at what point it becomes too costly, perhaps, evaluating that experience for everyone. And so that's, and that's, philosophical high level. And we are so far down that I think, some of this fee schedule I see, there's like 1,200 or 1,200 fees. If somebody's got 4 or 5 high schools, they might have more. And that is a lot. And it's a lot to deal with when you're trying to do it, administer that type of policy. But I just want to emphasize, but you cannot pick up that opportunity to charge school fees. You also have you have to administer that. And that administration of that is both the school fee waivers and the counting of the fees themselves. And as the task force was working on this, I mean, they were as concerned about the students who don't qualify for fee waivers, but are being excluded because the fees have gone up exponentially in the last 10 years. And they continue to rise. So, I mean, you guys are dealing with it every day in your budgets. What do we offer and what do we don't? I mean, but you cannot say we're gonna just go out and charge fees without saying, okay, I've also got to administer the waivers and I've got to do the accounting right on it.
your point, well, with Tammy, like with the audits, you guys know your families, you know your situations. We're gonna look at your policies and procedures. Like, what have you guys put in place, and are you abiding by what you've put in place for your people, for your families? And so yes, it's subjective, but what do you have set up based off of those subjective things? And so that's what we would look at.
When I was talking about the risk and the subjectivity, that's primarily the risk you have. The parents are gonna help out. They want to escalate that to a level, a court level.
1 second, we'll do an online question in a minute. We have one more back here. Unless we've answered it.
I just want to know how fee waivers apply to required group fundraisers. Could you address that for just a second?
With fee waivers.
How fee waivers, affect required group fundraisers. So if a kid is on a fee waiver, then does that mean they do not have to participate in required group fundraising?
Great question. Fantastic
Why
question.
would they have to?
It's group, I know, it would be a fee and all fees are fee waivable. So, but.
Limit his time.
Huh?
You can limit his time in the game. That would be
Exactly.
the only thing.
And that's the discussion we had in our work groups that we've had is, it's not necessarily the ones about fee waivers that will worry. Most of them will usually come and participate, but you can, if they're not there at this required group fundraising, you can limit their time. And the statement that was made was the fee waiver students, if they can't participate, it's usually because they're babysitting family members or they have a job that they're helping provide for their family. And in those cases, they're coming and talking with you of I've got this situation and you know what's happening. And as long as you guys are working with them and making sure that they have an opportunity to show that they have participated, great. If they flat out refuse to, no, I'm not gonna come, I'm on a fee waiver, you have the ability to limit their participation of how the way the rule is written. Okay, online question.
I think maybe this is better, unless there's another different question. There are a few people that have more questions about fundraising and that sort of thing that I think might be better addressed individually. So unless somebody pops up with another thing, I think we're okay. Let you contact them back because some of them are
Very
a lot of
specific.
questions.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, there was one more back here. Great. Did you have a question still or no? No? Okay.
I'm just going to make mention of the slide that you have up right here, going back to that.
Yes.
With the question came out to be saying, maybe misconstrued in the idea that you can't change the out of pocket. The fee itself is the district comes up with the maximum. So the district determines the maximum fee. And then the schools themselves look within that maximum. This is what we expect that we'll charge. So for example, the maximum fee is going to be $100 for soccer. The school itself says, we think we're going to charge $50 for soccer. 25 of it, we're going to try to fundraise, and 25 will be the expected out-of-pocket fee. If the fundraiser completely falls through, then they need to go back they may not need to change their spend plan because the spend plan said, here's what we may have to go in and change the part of the spend plan that said the out-of-pocket part will be this much and the fundraising will be this much, because obviously the fundraiser completely fell through. So you're still under that. The word maximum applies definitely under making sure you're staying under the district's board approved maximum. And the school is under that maximum, but as long as you're clear with the parents and state this fundraiser is to try to reduce your out-of-pocket costs, but obviously you didn't want to participate in that, so now your out-of-pocket cost will cover that. My understanding is you're okay within that frame to then go back and change your spend plan and just note, as long as you're notifying parents up front, this is the direction we're going, then you're okay.
Fantastic comment. Thank you. No, and you can even put a statement on your fee schedule that says this is expected fundraising. Fundraising may be more or less than what this is, which may affect that out of pocket.
Right.
And it's having that transparency with your families. You want to make sure, because that's where a lot of things we don't catch until we go and do the monitoring, or we have a parent calling in that's complaining of, hey, is this allowed? Can they do this? And if you can't, that's what triggers action out from us to you right now. And then monitoring will bring up other things. So yes.
Just a question about the accounting side of things. Sometimes it's hard to define co-curricular versus curricular. And putting them in one of those buckets versus another bucket. Maybe talk to the potential consequences of that. In our opinion, we identified it as a co-curricular, but maybe through an auditing process, it's more defined as a curricular. Is there potential consequences for something like that? And then also when it comes to individual versus group fundraising, the individual fundraisers, we would need to account for differently because they're not considered a fee, right? So anyway, those are my two kind of accounting, I guess, side questions.
Curricular and co-curricular, again, sometimes we overcomplicate it. We make it more than what it needs to be. And so here's our course. And we're giving instruction, there's a teacher tied to that, that is curricular. Co-curricular, so example, choir, you have a choir class, they are teaching that. Then you have a trip for that choir class, okay? That would be considered a co-curricular activity because it is tied specifically to that core instructional class. So if you cannot tie something back to core instruction, it's not gonna be co-curricular. It's gonna fall under that extracurricular category.
You know, the curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular definitions have been around for a long time, but they're not in the charter accounts.
Okay.
They're, you know, so, they are in the charter accounts and speak to some of the activities that they get filed up through the NACS or so forth. But to answer your question, I don't know that there's a great deal of consequences to you in misclassifying one or the other. We had the consequences because we wanted to speak to it for this legislative ask. And they were combined, the curricular and co-curricular were combined to get to that ask. And as we report up through the national, you know, reports and files, you know, those come together. But as you can see, the impact or the dollar amount between the two is somewhat, you know, the prior year, because we was a 4.7 million to a 6.3 million. So one's 57% of total, one's 8%. So it's a little, it will skew it just a little bit, but it's such a, you know, somewhat inconsequential to the overall ask of the village.
So if you have a choir as a curricular course, but they have an after-school concert at the end of their term or whatever, like I have that as a curricular because they're not
Part of the class.
It's part of the class, it's required.
Right, but if they go for a trip, they go somewhere else for
That's part
that,
of the class.
you're tying it as curricular.
Yeah, that's part of the class. Because that's,
Yeah, it gets, the co-curricular curricular is, it's muddled.
Yeah,
It's
because-
very nuanced.
Yeah,
So that's why I was asking.
Sometimes, you know, and the non-curricular clubs, or you can tie that somewhat, you know, your Lego clubs and so forth. And I had to ask, one guy called up, says, okay, we have our choir, like bountiful madrigals. Okay, in the summer we go, we tour, but not everybody has to tour. But there's a fee to that. But it has nothing to do with their grade or what they're doing. Not everybody goes. It's just, you know, a bunch of them go and they do these summer concerts to different parades and ride the floats and stuff like that. It's almost a club, a separate, you know. So to me, that would be an extracurricular because it's not tied to the grade. They're doing it after, not during instructional hours and stuff, which the folklore is. But yeah, you'll have to decide. But a concert, I mean, if you don't show up to the choir concert at the end of the year, that's part of your grade. You know, you have to look at those.
So then what is that one? A curricular?
I would call that a co-curricular after school, but not.
But they do one
during-
performance. It's not like they have to practice after school every day.
Yeah, exactly. But then we have some that meet during lunch hour, you know, like have a half hour during lunch hour and they practice. Well, I don't know why the fee would be charged for that, but anyway.
And the definitions are in code of the curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular, and I do like how they're explained there. And so, and then the thing is like, if there's something wrong, let's have that communication with the auditor, the monitoring. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out why things are classified where they're at and gain a better understanding together. I mean, we're still learning with you guys. So we just want to make sure that we do get it right eventually. Online question?
Yeah, there was a question about participation. So as a charter school, there's a student who's on a fee waiver who attends or who plays basketball at one school, soccer at another school, and goes to dances at a third. Does the charter school then pay for the fees associated with those things?
There is a different regulation that falls under for charter schools. I don't have it at the top of my head.
So it's one of the questions that's in the chat and you can reach back out to that
Yeah,
person.
We'll reach out
We'll reach back out to them.
But
Yeah,
to answer it general, of charter school, you only have one school of district. You don't have to basically share or pay at one school, not 3 or 4 that he's attending or going.
And our understanding of that other regulation has changed as we've talked with these other departments. And so that's where it's like, it is a regulation that charter schools do have to abide by, but we've received further clarification from what we originally understood it to be. But each student they have their, I can't remember how they term it in that rule, but it's basically their assigned district school.
District of residence.
Yeah, their district of residence. And so basically, every student has a district of residence. And so they have a school that they're assigned to, and they can choose to go to a charter within that. So if the student chooses to attend extracurricular activities because the charter doesn't offer it, they do have to pay, the charter would have to pay a $75 participation fee for students on fee waivers. But if that student chooses to go to a school that's outside of their district residence, the charter is not responsible for that.
I think we let's finish up on the fee schedule.
Okay.
We'll get the question.
Yeah, we'll get back. So we'll move on.
Submit your questions if you have one, and we'll get to them.
Yeah, great
So
question.
I think we need to move on because we have a huge topic today of textbooks that y'all came for, I know, that we need to talk about, so.
Okay, so just real quick on this is that easily understood statement on the delineation. And then the other thing we wanted to cover is the statement to parents about fees being waived. So on the fee schedule, you list that, hey, your student may be available to have one or more fees waived, but then you must also include if they are denied, you can appeal that final decision. So we've noticed you guys have gotten really good about saying the fee waivers, but not about mentioning the appeal. Some of you are awesome. Make sure you have that appeal statement on the fee schedule as well.
You guys skipped over a couple.
Okay, we can walk through fee schedules real quick, Jen. Let me cover them really quick.
Wait a minute, say that again, is you have to have it on your fee schedule?
So you have your fee schedule, okay? And then on the fee schedule, you mentioned that students can have one or more fees waived. Okay, so there's the fee waivers that they can apply for, and then students can appeal the final fee waiver decision.
Or qualifying for being,
Yeah, so if they submit for a fee waiver and it's denied, they can appeal that.
No, what I'm saying, you have your fee schedule, and then you have your waiver policy and you have your waiver, that you come back, or, the
Policy.
policy, it says that, hey, if you get denied, you can ask for it again. Those are 3 separate. Is that okay?
The fee schedule
Fee schedule?
is meant to be up, like the fee schedule and the policy, the fee waiver policy are supposed to be one. If we go back to this, or is it this one right here? In code, it says the fee waiver policy is a part of the fee schedule. So you want to have those tied together when you hand that to parents. It is one.
Even if they are separate, give them together.
Yeah,
Well, all our stuff's online. It's just all right together. Is that okay?
that's fine.
They have them separate, but they're all.
So
right.
long as they can access them, same
Oh,
place, it's
okay.
all is one.
All right, I was
Yeah.
gonna say, where you put
Yeah,
that on?
yeah, no, it's fine.
All right.
Okay, any further questions on that? Okay, well, I just wanted to run through some quick examples of the fee schedules here. So these are ones that we've recently received, okay? So we have the invoice on this side, this is the fee schedule. This is what the parent received, okay? Their question is, can they even charge this fee? So us looking at it, we're like, okay, science lab, maybe the integrated science over here might match up. Student body fee could be, for the dollar amounts the same, could be the basic registration, but it's not worded the same. And so it's like, when you're doing these, your invoices that the parents receive on their receipts, they should be able to tie that directly back. So when it says basic registration, the invoice should say basic registration. So as a parent, I can pull that up and be like, oh, this is approved on the fee schedule, $49, basic registration. Yes, they can charge it. These 3 fees, we couldn't find. They're not on this fee schedule, okay? Technically, because they're not, if this is the only fee schedule they have, they could not charge those fees to the parent because they have not been approved on the fee schedule. Yes.
So I just want to clarify with that because and ours, we're working on it. It's in progress. But so say like we have a business class fee, but we don't have every type of business class listed. So they're on this, what the parents get is gonna have a specific name of a business class. Can it not, is that not okay to have just business on there?
On their receipt, so like, if you're saying it's the, so like earth science class fee. So make sure you have, if you're gonna specify there's earth science, whatever you've labeled it on your fee schedule,
Has to be part
science
of it.
class fee.
So
you
we
have
just
it
have
tied.
science over here.
Right, then you say, here's earth science dash science class fee. So it is clear. Yeah, hey, my students in this class, and this is a science class fee over here. We can find that, okay?
So if that said, this way, where you have a district fee schedule, the maximums that are set, and then the individual schools then populate the classes and create a school fee schedule. So theirs, on their schedule, so it says science, $40 is the maximum. They put biology, $20, and so they send out the biology $20 fee, which is under the science fee. Is that okay, or does they just have to get the general science $20?
I
Because
think
each
we-
high school is doing their fee schedule within, because of what, some may charge less for one fee than another. The one science department may say, we're trying to buy the spinner thing right here, so our fee is this, where the other may say, we basically only need some fees for test tubes, so we're only gonna charge $5. This one charges $20. Science says science $40. Do we have to say science only, or can we be specific as the time?
Can the parent tie it back to the approved fee schedule and know what was being charged was approved? So if they have, hey, here's our biology fee, this is how much it was, can they find where that was approved?
Science. So
On the
that
fee
they would have
schedule.
to be able to figure biology as a science.
Yes, so however, on your invoice, you could have your biology and then in parentheses or a dash, science fee
Okay.
of where they can find that on the fee schedule.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, you're good.
Can you tell us where that is in the rules? That it has to be worded exactly the same?
I think that the question is here, that we're trying to get down to that this be easily understood and, connect the dots. We had probably, a good number of calls this summer on fee schedules. And you're right, biology is science, science, is biology. You guys work in this all the time. But as a parent, and you're quite right, a parent may be looking for something to complain about. Maybe they are. But I think that if we can, as much as possible, kind of, connect the dots for them a little bit. There's a hierarchy or structure. Because we have found, like this gentleman back here, there's this district, maximum schedule. And then there's all these, each high school has its own schedule. We got to make sure that both those schedules get to the parent. That was another issue we had of a parent says, I looked at the school schedule, I knew it was there, then all of a sudden, I had no idea what it was. Well, that's all the district fees that were general for everybody in the district. So I guess if we are having these two separate schedules, make sure that they're together and that they're aware. I mean, half a dozen calls to us is not a large thing, but the fact that they've taking the time to try to find us and call us on our line, our phone line, is what it is. But so it's just, again, trying to get to that transparency, that easy to understand. Do we have a rule that you have to connect the dots for the parents? No, but we do have to have a rule. In the rule, it does say, and in the code, it says easily understood, specific, delineated means specific. I mean, so we just gotta, see if we can do, like I said, if you're gonna charge fees, you also pick up that piece that you have to administer it, communicate them, and do the right by the school fees. You're gonna charge for those fees, you've got this other administrative burden to deal with it.
Okay, next one that I want to move on to, this was another one. So fee schedule had these, the invoice that the parents received had this. We actually got a couple of these this year. And the parent was like, why am I paying a district fee? I'm paying for my child to go to this school. I've got my computer fee to the school here, but why am I sending this to the district? Like, it's not even here what is happening. And so that's where the parents are like, I don't know what is going on. This one, two options, okay? One, you put it all under one, okay? Here's the computer fee, it says $18. It equated to the $18 that was on the fee schedule, the two of them when you add them together. If that's what you want to do, put it as $18 for the invoice for the parents. So they can say, okay, $18, I was charged, okay? Or put your fee schedule. This much is going to the school, this much is to the district. If you split it on the fee schedule, you need to have that spend plan of where it's going to at the school, and where it's going to at the district. Again, make it easy for parents to read this. They know why they're charging fees. Questions?
So if we split the fee out into two different budgets and our system doesn't allow us to put it in one line, what do you suggest we do?
I think, you know, communication, it comes down to communication. How are we communicating it? If you're right, they got all sorts of things going on happening with the budget system itself. You identify, you got some short codes here. I think, you know, it's just dynamics of trying to figure a better way to communicate.
Yeah, I would say think about your fee schedule. If you can't do it in your budgeting system and you need to have it broken out into the two different fees, show it that way on the fee schedule. So you are clear for what parents are being charged. One more.
Just a reminder that the microphones, the green dots on the ceiling will pick up everything.
Oh, yeah. So any side conversations, the microphones will pick up. So just hold on those if you can till after. Thanks. Okay, we're going to move on. Corresponding spend plan. So this is one that we pulled. We just want to go through some things. This one, really awesome, right here. So football, they are showing, these are all expenses. They have their delineation. Here is the total, okay? They've listed a fee amount for each one of those. They have a spend plan associated with each of that. They've even stated that all fees are waivable. So a parent can go in and say, hey, my student wants to try out for football. I qualify for a fee waiver. They would be able to have these fees waived, okay? They've also listed, here's the out-of-pocket. Parents are responsible for the physical here. They stated that regardless of what that is, the school doesn't know. They don't know what insurance the parent has. Required group fundraising. They're hoping over here that those items will be covered by the fundraising. Okay, so we just wanted to show you an example that does up to, this is okay because it provides a maximum. So if you have schools that are charging less than, and it's a little bit different for each school, they just know that they can't charge over that for the parents. Okay, we're gonna keep moving on real quick here. This was fee waiver statement, where I was talking about on the fee schedule, having this statement. This one, they listed, hey, you may be able to qualify for a fee waiver. What they don't have is just a statement concerning appeals. And this was just general statements that they had at the top of the fee schedule. So if you're gonna do that, you're gonna have general statements, add that statement for the appeals right underneath. Or within that, if the fee waiver is denied, you have the right to appeal. See the fee waiver policy. Something as simple
If it
as that.
says it right on the fee waiver application, very boldly and clearly, why would you put it there? If you're just trying to give them information about these fees are all waivable, please find the fee schedule here.
So, because it should be tied into that fee waiver policy, and they should be able to find that. So simple, quick, easy to understand for parents. So if this is what they're getting, they've got, hopefully they should be getting that fee waiver policy with this, that it'll be there. And if you're doing that, awesome. But it's just another little best practice. Let's make it as clear as day for parents. Any other questions on this section? Besides the ton we have online. I know there's a lot and we will get to those. We'll get back with you on those. Any other questions right now? All right.
We're gonna do a quick little break. We ran over time on what we were thinking here. So let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll be right back, okay? So this is something that probably the new information, not new. We've been talking about it for a couple of years, but we really haven't talked about it in a lot of detail. And that is textbooks. What do we mean by textbooks? Because we know this upcoming year, school year, the 22-23 school year, that we have this new regulation coming into effect. And that is that this is actually out of code. It's also repeated in the rule, is that there cannot be a charge for a textbook or maintenance cost of school equipment, which you're thinking, well, that's kind of weird to put those two together. But I believe, and there, the intent here, there, as we talk about the definition of textbook, you'll see how those two come together. And anyway, so let's go dig right in. Okay, so textbook is described and is defined specifically as instructional material necessary for participation in activity, course, or program. Textbook then goes on further to be, includes a hard copy or printed pages of the book, a consumable workbook. We have a lot of questions about that, but it's a consumable workbook. You're buying something else, it's, and what do you think about a consumable item? You think supply, but it's including consumable workbooks, computer hardware, software, or digital content. And so you kind of include this big blanket of everything in instructional materials, and then due to the response of the LEAs and so forth, they backed it off, but textbook does not include instructional equipment or instructional supplies. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are from the accounting side or from the administration side, but we often talk, we often talk about consumable or durable when accounting terms. And I'm going to go into a little more detail in a minute. But our first question when we're asking ourselves, is this a textbook and can I charge a fee for it? Is you got to think, is this instructional material? And is it the goods or services being purchased for the individual student? A textbook cannot be, we think about consumable, durable, that should no longer be our question about that. Okay, school equipment, we always know that talks about something that's durable in nature, and we can't charge for the maintenance charge of that equipment. And so let's go one more further. Okay, so we've added a bunch of new terms. Instructional material, instructional equipment, can charge a fee for instructional equipment that's a durable item that typically will belong to the student. We have instructional supply, which is a consumable item that will be used in the course of the activity. And then we got to throw in the classroom and student supply also on that, and can be used for one or more course or activity or at home and commonly purchased or used. And the rule and the code go down and list some specifics there, like pencils, scissors, notebooks. Now remember, we talk you can't charge fees for these, except where you can't in elementary. And we already discussed a little bit about those things that are non-waivable or not considered a fee. That would be the personal discretionary charges for instructions unless it's required. I mean, not instructions, insurance unless it's required, college credit. We already talked a little bit about the yearbook, the classroom, the letter and jacket. And sometimes you'll CTE courses, you'll have a jacket for the FFA or FHA. And if you require that jacket to be worn when they go to a national competition or a regional competition, then it's required, and then it is a fee, okay? So once you make anything in that item required, then it becomes a fee. And then there are items that are designated specifically not to be fees, and those are if you're lost or damaged, our school supplies, lost or damaged supplies or equipment, and then our school uniforms and school lunch.
I make one clarification on student supplies. In the rule, it addresses, I'll stand up, but in the rule, it addresses student supplies is you've got your papers, your pencils, like those things, you can expect the students to bring. Like it's expected. Elementary schools, you provide that for them, okay? But with the student supplies in secondary schools, if you have a student on fee waivers, provide that for them. Student supplies, pencils, papers, 40737 is where that states, okay? So just be aware of that. If there are students on fee waivers and they don't have access to pencils, paper, student supplies that are categories there, I mean, basic gym, lifestyle clothes, provide that for them with the student supplies.
You have to ask them then in registration?
Fee waivers. I mean, yeah, it's just.
But if they're on a fee waiver, they might still have access to that. How do you know?
Yeah. Communication with the, whoever you're meeting with who's approved it. Again, you want to have just the person who is overseeing the fee waivers and approves that. You could put, if you have a paper notice that goes out to those families saying, hey, you've been approved for the fee waiver, have a statement on there. If your student is in need of student supplies, have them contact this person at the office. And so basic statement, so that way you're not calling them into the office, drawing attention to them. It just is on that paper that you have sent out with that student supplies, if those students need them.
Okay,
Okay, one question. So on gym clothes, if the code is just, hey, bring a color, it doesn't have just a shirt and some shorts, to provide that.
Or because if you'll notice on student supplies, these are the things that are basically addressed in the rule. You have your pencils, scissors, notebooks, crayons, basic lifestyle gym clothing. And so yes, if there's a student that is on fee waivers and does not have access to a basic t-shirt or a pair of shorts, again, have it on a statement if they need these
Shoes
things.
too?
Could be if there's required shoes, if they do not have tennis shoes. I mean, most of them are probably going to have a t-shirt and shorts that they can bring. Okay. And so if you put a statement, this is what student supplies includes. If you need that and you're on fee waivers, let us know.
now, there are further definitions I didn't bring into this that talk about uniforms, activity clothing, and so forth, and school uniforms. You can expect a child to come up dressed, okay? And come dressed to school with shoes, socks, pants, shirt, and everything, okay? So, but if you require, PE class to change and have a t-shirt and shorts. Now, if you say they have to have a red t-shirt and gray shorts or something like that, then you're getting into some requirements that will actually make it prescriptive and make it a fee and a fee waivers. But basic lifestyle is considered, a fee for those students. It's a fee. And your fee waivers will have to be looked at. So there are other definitions. We just wanted to make sure that there's, what I was kind of focusing in here is that supply definition. So that there's, and we can go through that. I can bring that code up if we need to on the other activity clothing and so forth, but there are further definitions about clothing itself.
And if you have more questions on that, just email us and we can answer you directly.
Okay, so like the accountant in us are always looking at the chart of accounts and we're thinking, okay, supply, that's a consumable, it's out there, fine. But now we've layered on top of that in the rule for textbooks that there are certain things that are considered supplies in the chart of accounts that now are textbooks. And we even have durable items that are in the 700 series of the codes that now, that even though they're equipment, they're going to be instructional materials and under that textbook definition. So you can't, it's not cut and dry anymore as to where, supplies or equipment, you've got to step out when you're talking about who's going to charge a school fee. There's a separate category of definitions that are in the rule that do not match up with being durable or consumable as the equipment is in there. And so it includes the instructional equipment. And I've got a lot of detail here. I'm not sure how much to go into it with you or how many questions we'll get. But just for the textbooks, you cannot charge a fee. And it is under the chart of accounts as a supply, the 600 series. Textbooks are their own thing, books. But let me bring attention to the technology supplies, which is your iPad, your computers, and so forth. Your laptop, your one-to-one devices are considered a textbook. Even though they deliver content for many classes, they're used by one student to deliver that content. And so it should be that is now considered a textbook and you cannot charge a fee going forward the next school year.
When you say next year, you talking about this school year?
No, next year.
If they do.
Now, we charge a refundable kind of like a fee to be used towards repairs. since the repair part is kind of like considered that way, are we good in that sense? Because like, the problem comes is when a student break or do something to the iPad, till you manage all those things, they miss out all that time. To prevent that, we kind of upfront took $50 from them to be used towards repairs. If not, we return them back that fund. I mean, how does that play?
Yeah, it has to come, you can charge a refundable fee, and we've got another slide on that. Let me address it because you've asked it. Yes, you can charge a refundable fee. We've got a guidance document on our website about this. It has to be fully refundable. You can't withhold for maintenance out of that refundable fee. It has to come under the description of being lost or damaged, which your repair question, so that's again, you can withhold for those things, but you cannot just withhold for routine maintenance. And that's why the school equipment maintenance is included in the textbook definition.
And it's in code that it addresses that refundable deposit. So 5016, I believe 53G-7-5016 is where it talks about that a fully refundable deposit for insurance is not considered a fee.
And we've got a slide on that, so you'll have that going forward. I won't jump to it right now. Okay, so now let's talk equipment. We talked about school equipment. We talked about instructional equipment. Instructional equipment is not instructional materials. So instructional equipment is not the computer, the laptop. It is whatever tool or what the student needs as part of the activity. And typically, but not always, becomes property of the student upon exiting. And then, of course, is subject to fee waivers. Both your instructional supply and equipment is subject to fee waivers. So the code goes on to describe and list a few things in 407. Chairs for styling, the band instrument, the cap. And these typically are related to your CTE courses. And so, but this does not include school equipment. Now, so when you're thinking of school equipment, you probably ought to think school equipment is used by multiple students. The bandsaw, the telescope, whatever that multiple students use. So it's used by multiple students. So it's durable. It could be capitalized, or maybe it's just expended under supply. It doesn't hit that 5,000 threshold in county. So we just wanted to emphasize that we've got these descriptions now, these definitions, that this is instructional material, and these are textbooks. You can't charge fees. And then you've got your supplies, your equipment in counting, and they don't align. There's specifics in the rule coding of textbooks. Now, have I cleared that up as much as mud? Okay.
No, so question. So can you go back to that other slide?
Back.
Previous. So a band instrument, you can't charge in fiscal year? Charge a fee?
No, you
to
can't.
rent?
You can't. Instructional equipment, you can.
Okay, instructional equipment, you can, but it doesn't become the property of that student, correct?
Right. So that's why the word typical,
Okay.
because a lot of schools have all the band, full equipment. So you can charge a fee, subject to fee waivers for the band equipment.
Okay.
So if we give our Chromebook to our students, they leave with it when they're done at our school, then can I charge it as an instructional equipment fee?
No, that's because these computers are specifically called out in the textbook as computer hardware, software, or digital content. So that's our first ask. If you're going down to the season tree, that's the first ask. Is this textbook or not? You have to go to this definition. Is it an instructional material, no matter what format it is, book, paperback? Is it hardware, consumable hardware, consumable book hardware, software, or digital content? This is huge. I believe there was a school late in something, they even went as far as to build their own network to get Wi-Fi out to all the students, and that's a huge cost and so forth. But that would be school equipment. So the maintenance of that school equipment would not be able to charge a fee for.
What about an FFA jacket with the student's name on it? Is this considered to be a waivable fee?
Only if it's not, that's only required, that's only a fee if they're required to wear that to participate in their CTE course or the co-curricular or curricular activity. And I thought co-curricular there being they go to competitions and they participate as a representative of the school. So if the jacket is there, with their name on it, and they're required to wear it to compete for the curricular or co-curricular activities, it is a fee and it has to be waivable.
Another
Yeah.
question on instruments. Elementary schools there are elementary schools that charge for instrument fees. Is that allowed as equipment?
No. Elementary schools should not be charging a fee for sheet music or a recorder or a harmonica, any of those things. They should not be charging a fee.
If they're participating in a junior high program. So like
Okay.
our elementary kids go to the junior high.
Six, because it's the sixth grade that.
I think it's.
Yes, I bet there is a call out, if it's a sixth grade, but there is, what do we call it?
They're part of a secondary
There
program.
we go, yeah.
Yeah.
Middle school.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so it's, if they're joined in with those students,
They
then
are. I think they go in the morning before school to an elementary program. It's an element, but it's taught by the junior high band program. So it's kind of extra. It's not during their school day.
It's after
So,
school,
yeah,
before
it's
school.
outside of school hours.
Then you can charge, you can charge a rental fee, right?
Okay, yeah, if it's outside of school hours,
Yes.
no, it would be subject to fee waivers
Right.
if
No.
they're on fee waivers.
Right.
Yes.
other questions?
So there's a follow-up on the jacket question. So the question was, is it a waivable fee if the jacket is something that they have to wear?
It's required,
If it's
yes.
not required,
Not
I
required.
would call out the student because the student doesn't have one, then does it become a waivable fee?
So the rule talks about implied pressure. So if they're gonna be the only one that is not wearing it at that competition, yeah, there's the implied pressure to purchase it. And yes, if they're on fee waivers.
And then one other question, if, back to his refundable fee that for the Chromebooks. So if they break it, uses up the $50 to pay for, to fix it, then can you charge another refund? Well, that's not refundable at that time. Do you charge another fee to, how does that work?
Well, if you've taken the deposit for, I guess, damage or loss.
Right, they break it,
Yeah.
you spend the $50, now what?
Then you take another $50 from them because then they have to keep that in the kind of like as you
Okay.
said. The reason we keep it because see if we work after the fact, then 2-3 weeks that child is without a device in his hand or her. That upfront fee is kind of actually to make it smooth so that it's right there, send it and give the other kind of like that so that they are not missing that time. But then another $50 we take because they use that $50.
Online.
This is, do you have time?
You're good there.
So this is going back to the computer as a textbook. The question says, the statute you had in the slide seems to be making reference to digital license costs for electronic textbooks or computer programs that must be purchased to deliver instruction. I didn't see this meant an actual computer. So just wanted clarification on that slide, if you could go.
Computer hardware, software, we have that the computer, the iPad, the Chromebook, they're all computer hardware. They're the computer. I don't see it differently than that. But I'm happy to have a further conversation if they'd like, but.
But we did have some conversations with the superintendency about this. And they had referred back to the work group where with the computer hardware, one reason why it was put in code is because a lot of those students that are on fee waivers, that's the only way they have access to the course material. And they don't have access to a computer at home. They just don't. And so they were like, that is their textbook. that's how they access that material. And so it is tied to that computer hardware. And so it was very specific in how they worded that code with the hardware, computer hardware, software, and digital content. So that meant the computer itself.
And we didn't bring it up in this discussion, but there's also reference to the Wi-Fi in the code here that can, you know, if the student has to have that Wi-Fi, he can complete everything at home, but he has to go home and do homework. And he doesn't have Wi-Fi at home. Are you providing the Wi-Fi or time for them to do their homework, you know, at school where they have out Wi-Fi access? You know, and this became very apparent during, you know, the pandemic, that there was many working at home and where was the Wi-Fi access and so forth. So I apologize, we didn't bring that up in here, but that is also referenced in the code as being, you know, don't have to pay Wi-Fi for the entire family, but you do have to have availability to the student to access Wi-Fi to do their homework. Anyway, all right, so supply, I think we're on instructional supply. Instructional supplies you can charge a fee for. It's typically consumable, non-reusable supply that's necessary for students' part of the activity. Prescriptive footwear, you can require it, it's a fee, has to be subject to fee waivers, paint brushes, wood, Legos. I know we all have Legos at home, but you know, Legos for robotics is a different thing. And of course the film, and also film up 3D printers. Okay, so we went very fast through that, much faster than I anticipated that we would. So are there any questions? But just know we have all these terminologies, these definitions that we need to work with on the code side related to fees, and then the accounting side's a little different. Okay. All right. So we get asked all the time about novels. Are they a consumable work? But they need to buy them so they can make notes and stuff in them. If they have to be able to make notes or annotate them, that is part of your curriculum. So that's a textbook. So in the future, you'll need to provide those novels for them. Now, if there's a bunch of the library they can check out, that's probably a good thing too. But of course, you don't want them writing in them. Then we get the damage and to the books and so forth. So just be aware that yes, those novels that you have to read as part of your literature courses are also part of the textbook definition. And then we did talk about the refundable deposit on the fee inventories.
I have a question about that, just from what he was saying. So you charge that fee, but like in our district, I don't know how it happens with others, not every fee gets paid. But you can't keep the kid from having, if everybody's getting that fee charged and getting like a Chromebook or something, you can't not give them the Chromebook because they haven't paid that, can you?
Yeah, you got to be careful with these deposits, because if you're keeping the deposit on the Chromebook or the computer hardware impedes them from participating, then you kind of stepped over that line that they need to be able to fully participate in the curricular activity. So
if they haven't paid it, but you have an AR on their account, you still have to give them that piece of equipment.
I give them both.
We have a document on the website called Electronic Device Deposits that has more information for you if you have questions about that.
Okay, now this was supposed to be our break, but since we're moving right along, we'll just continue on. Okay. Okay. This is a part of the code that actually, when they did all the adjustments last year for the pandemic, they moved this part back a year. And this has a lot to do with our activity-based costing that, you know, beginning and it got switched just to 1 year, to the 22-23 school year, that a fee shall equal or less than the expenses incurred by LE in providing the student the activity, course, or program for which the LE is imposed. So this equal or less than the expenses incurred, and then it talks about that the LE may not impose additional fee, increase or supplant or subsidize another fee. This is why we kind of threw in all that dialogue about the fee schedule earlier. And I'm going to go back to some of that now as we talk through this. And this is hard. Student fees, we charge a student fee based upon the individual student. That's where it starts. It's identifiable as a student transaction. Therefore, the costs associated with that need to be identifiable to that student participating. Now, we talked about instructional equipment, you know, the band equipment, that the student uses, their telescope, the shears they might use in a barbing course. That student use that one, you need a 1-by-1 device for those students to participate in some of that. And you don't need a 1-to-1 on the telescope. You get every lab, you know, the telescope or stays there and the kids come in, multiple kids use it. So we want to make sure that we're looking at limiting, we're looking at school fees and the costs associated is for that student to participate with that. Now, throughout all of the code and the rule, they were very specific to talk about a student and activity. There's a lot of singular designations there. So when we talk about the costs, we need to make sure that we're looking that typically this means that such as an instructional supply or instructional equipment, a student needs to participate, or the travel expenses or student membership. We even had a conversation with the different leadership here, that also means that for a staffing expenses, staffing supplies, if you're going to pay someone under contract, a teacher, to do this, and they happen to pick up another art class, you know, maybe you need, so they come in their contract, but their contract allows them to do that. You probably should not be charging that salary into allocating that to the cost to this, to match with the student fees. We're charging a part of the student fees to pay that salary. But if you're bringing in someone that perhaps from the community, and this is the only thing they're, not the only thing they're doing, but they're coming specifically to teach that art class. So you got additional stipend beyond your contracts. They'll have a contract, but you know, they're coming just to do that class. Well, then you could probably charge a part of that salary and pay part of that salary with those fees. Okay, so it's kind of we want to, okay, so let's digest on that a little bit and see if there's anyone that has any questions or wants to discuss that a little further in detail, what that means.
Yep, just one
Okay.
popped up.
All right.
Can the coaching stipend be paid from a fee?
Coaching stipend, I don't know if you guys ever know the guy, American Ride, Alpine. He teaches at Alpine, doesn't he? Stan, what's his name, Stan? I got to know him at GoEd because we would have him come talk all the time. Because they filmed American Ride. I don't know if you guys know, the man cave for American Ride was over here on 6th in some warehouse. Okay, I actually went over there one time. But Stan, he was a great guy. Anyway, I had him come and he would speak at some things. Anyway, he also taught, and that's all he did. He went in and helped coach and be a coach, and he was great. That's why he came to Utah. He played football for the university stuff, but he happened to be a history buff too. And so anyway, but yeah, they brought him in. They paid him a little bit of a stipend to come in and help him do, you know, and I can't remember which coach he was. I don't remember. I didn't follow football that well. And so, yeah, that little stipend, they paid him to come in and just try to do that. But he wasn't on the teaching staff per se. He wasn't, you know, under contract, 180 days, 90 hours. That's what he did. Yes, that would count. That stipend you're paying a coach to come in would be allowable and part of allowable expense that you can use student funding and funds to pay. I slaughtered that, but let me say it again. We're talking about what we can use, expenditures we can use, and student funds to pay. Okay.
So can I just, clarification for me. So you have a coach that is hired for the program at the school. They're there full-time all the time. You cannot use funds for that, correct?
Well, what if they're a history teacher, but they do this after school? And there's, it's a stipend. They get a stipend for the year.
So that it's separate than the regular coach,
Yep.
someone else that comes in and helps out.
No. He works at the school.
Okay.
He's a history teacher, but then he likes to teach football on, the side. So now it's after school. It's not during the school. It has nothing to do with his regular teaching. But he does this. he does this football
So,
coaching on the
Yeah,
side.
it's 990, 180 contract hours to teach is this.
Mhm.
And then there's this additional stipend amount for just coaching.
Right.
So just that additional stipend coaching amount, funds for school fees can go in and pay
Can
that
pay for that.
stipend amount.
I think this is in regards to the current slide that's up. Just for clarification, so you can't have any kind of general school or flat school fee. You have to have fees that are individualized to the specific student. So the students, like it says, students' participation is what drives the fees for that particular student.
Like if that student wasn't participating, you would not need that fund to pay that fee.
And I'll probably slaughter this because I'm not sure exactly how to state it, but it's kind of combining several things. So this is the fees that we charge students kind of have to be directly related to that student. But so this kind of goes back to a fundraising question. When we have a group fundraiser and it's part of this fee schedule, but it's going to the program, and what if they're buying equipment for that program, not for an individual student, but equipment actually for that program? Would that be applying school fees because it's part of fundraisers to not specific to a student? So like a football pro, I don't know anything about football either. I mean, I like it, but
Use
I don't know
wrestling
about what
mats,
kind of
wrestling
equipment.
mats, because that,
Yeah.
you can only use them for 8 years or
okay,
something
so
like that.
wrestling mats. So that's what the program is fundraising for, and the group fundraiser is gonna go for wrestling mats. But fundraisers are considered a fee, but according to that, that would be.
Yeah, and that's then slaughtered fundraising, but yeah, they're required fundraisers. Now, if you go out and your booster club or whatever helps you raise money
Right.
because you want to reseed the football field, which is a capital expense, you want to buy the wrestling mats, have the more than 5,000 are capitalized and appreciated over the 8 years or whatever.
But you're
I
saying
would
this,
be very cautious not to charge or use school fees. Now, if they're a group fundraiser, you know, you just be careful not to make a required group fundraiser to get those.
so if you wanted to do a group fundraiser within your organization, but not require it, it
Yeah.
could be applied to the wrestling mats. But if it's a required group fundraiser, it can't be applied to something. It's got to be specific to those fees that are listed per student.
Right, so it's gotta be the travel cost for the students to get to the Carnegie Hall, whatever. And it's gotta be for the band, marching bands, uniforms or equipment to get.
So things that are directly related to the student.
But couldn't you charge for the wrestling mat for each of those 8 years for those students that have used it?
And
And that's, you know, because we talked about
that,
about this, saying that
yeah.
that's why on some of these fees, that there's gonna be more fees left in that program than what was used. Because now they know that in 2 years, we gotta replace that wrestling mat, and that's gonna cost $15,000.
But does that
So-
come from the direct student?
Well, every student that had used it should pay for that.
But I didn't
So-
think that was covered in this specific thing.
And I remember we had those conversations early on, and we even talked about one time if we needed to have the rule say, well, you can only do carryover of fees for so many, or have some amount of fees carryover. And that, you're right, it has evolved from that. And so I would be cautious of using those for that, or any type of capital expenditure or equipment or anything that, you know, and like I said, fundraisers are great, just don't make it a required fundraiser, because otherwise you're charging a fee that is, you know, subsidizing another student along the way. And I know you're saying, well, we divided by 8 and, you know, they're only using their shore, but, you know, we can talk about, be sure of your arguments, but I would be cautious. Maybe back away from those a little bit in that way and make sure it's just serving that student.
Well, that's hard because football helmets,
Yeah. Football helmets.
you
3 years,
use them more than,
3 years.
you can use them more than, you know, and so why should, you know, because if that person, if you got rid of all the football helmets on 1 year and then said, okay, now you are gonna be charged $300 for the full amount for that, but next year, the next person gets to use it. That's not fair.
Yeah, but it's just that pendulum, and there's the statements, we dug into them more and more. You know, talking about the singular student, we want to make sure typically doesn't mean it's gonna hold for all cases. So it's really gonna, you know, and unfortunately, it's probably gonna be one of those, it depends. You know, but, you know, that's why we're gonna be cautious to kind of move away from some of those. Funding those capital expenditures with and the uniform issue, but the pads and the football fields with school fees.
So just to clarify, are you saying you can't have a required fundraiser and purchase something that will be used for more than a year?
I would be cautious about doing it.
Well,
that's why I
is
said.
USP going to come back later and come down on us if we've done that?
I think that we would have to look at it and see if indeed the students who were participated in the program were not, you know, like you say, supplanting or subsidizing other students. I mean, and you just have to be, you know, sure of your arguments and sure of what you're doing there. But I would certainly look for these capital expenditures to be funded elsewhere other than school fees.
Slightly different question. The question posed in the chat was, can you speak to summer camps held at local universities or colleges under the direction of the school, but these camps are totally voluntary to attend? Should these fees be listed on a fee schedule?
Camps and clinics are interesting because you've got to, it depends. I'm gonna just preface it with that. It depends, because it's a camp or clinic. If we come and visit your school, and let's say it's a cheerleading squad, and every cheerleader that's on that squad attended these camps or clinics for 3 years prior to making the squad. Then, you know, you kind of, and was there someone there that says, hey, I every summer I went and somewhere else and I had to go, you know, on this family vacation and couldn't go to the camp or clinic, but I'm really good at cheerleading. Why didn't I make the squad? You know, you just start having those conversations. So I would be very, you know, cautious that if you're having that conversation, you're sure of your arguments, that attending that camp or clinic didn't get you a slot on the squad. You know, or, you know, because you attended it for 3 years, well, you can't do a backflip, and someone comes along and can do a backflip, they can't get on the, you know, on the squad. So I just, you know, just be cautious of those things. They can be fees if they are required. Now, my nephews, they have to go to this camp 2 weeks before school starts in order to be on, they can be in the regular band, but they can't be in the jazz band, or they can't be in this other band, you know, 3 or 4 different types of bands. Be careful of your requirements, your prerequisites for those curricular courses. Because if it is a prerequisite for a curricular or co-curricular, then it is a fee.
But if it's not a prerequisite and it's a camp and it's optional, it's school supported, that makes it a fee.
If it's school supported in that it uses school, are using the employees, because the facilities are at the university, not at the school.
But you've got your advisors that go with the
advisor
students.
who is acting as a advisor. Yeah, I'd be cautious if your advisor is going with that.
So you're just putting it as a fee and that's how you treat it, then you're safe. If you start with that, instead of trying to figure out, well, is it going to affect their acceptance into a program? You're supporting it and you put it as a fee, you're not going to ever get to the other.
Very correct. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, supported is if it uses school employees, school funds, or school facilities.
Or school advertising.
School advertising, facility, yeah.
And we do, the document that we just put out on fundraisers specifically addresses school sponsored and supported, and it walks you through those steps of, hey, look at these things. And then further down in the document we had, if it's not, then these are other regulations you need to consider. So be aware of that fundraiser document that we have online.
Yeah, can an LEA charge a general student body fee to cover general school activities?
Again, we start being very cautious of that because you've got to be able to identify what types of expenditures you're using for that registration fee. How many, we see it time and time again, registration fee. Well, if that student wasn't going to register, would you still have that cost? And you can say, well, it's we pay the front end office, or it's the paper, or it's the equipment. It's like, no, whether or not that student, if they pulled out and you still have all that cost, it's probably not identifiable to a student. I would say be very cautious of that going forward.
There's a student activity fee and they're executing activities, you could tie that to
The student activity
School
is different than the
dances.
registration, yeah.
registration. Okay.
Because they're going to specific events and, you're gonna have people watching the gate, that kid walking in the door, bus transportation, there's all, the activity fee is a little different animal than just that flat registration fee.
Did a tryout fee, argue that you have to hire a specific staff member to come to tryouts, you have to print materials specific to tryouts. You might have to do things specific for tryouts, so then that justify a tryout fee.
I think if you're doing the tryouts for whatever, and you've got to, like you say, you've got to hire a person to do that and somebody to come and monitor that. But if you had like not every student's got to be there and have those things. So like I said, you've got to kind of think through things. But just a blanket registration fee for school, that's a tough one to identify specific costs. Types of expenditures.
Would it be a good idea to include a delineation of what those school activities, general school activities are in your, in the fee schedule? Is that the right term?
Yeah, and okay, so now I want to kind of throw this back to our fee schedule. We had a spend plan. We talked about type of cost. And this is actually out of 53G. The spend plan talks about a specific amount related to one activity, class, or program, easy to understand delineation of the fee, and the corresponding spend plan with that. So these are some things when we're talking about the fee schedules and the fee, including that delineation, really, that they purposely put that word in there. If you listen to the committee's reports when they're doing that, they were intentful in putting that word delineation, which is something precise, something specific. And then 407 goes a little bit different. We worked and we reworked it, the spend plan with the work group. And it says for each fee charged, identifying the fee's funding uses, fee being charged shall be included a list or description of anticipated types of expenditures. We talked about that earlier. You don't have to list the shoes, the socks, and every piece of equipment that the uniform is going to be needed, but you can say uniform, but you probably should put travel separately. And travel might include the hotel, the meals, and those types of things. You might want to list transportation separately because that's a different type of expenditure depending upon, is it the airfare or is it the bus to get to the activities? You do some yearly accountants, if you come and get asked about the type of expenditures, how are you going to pull that out and describe it?
Going back to the activity fee, if the activity fee covers games and activities and also something like student incentives, is that acceptable if they were to delineate that and say this covers entrance to school football games and I don't know what else, activities such as maybe like an assembly or, and I don't know, student incentives that might be awards or things that are given out for, grades or participation.
Yeah, you're starting, like I said, as long as if someone comes and asks, can you list the type of expenditures that activity fee went to? And then can you identify that these students' participation and so forth with it. So we want to be, again, be very careful, make sure that once you do it, you might come and ask for that detail later of the types of expenditures. And but it's just by type, it's not individual expenditures, so. Okay, work something up better on that and respond to that. And we might just put an FAQ back on the website. We'll put training out there, but we'll put this FAQ in on there also. Okay, so okay. Now, just also know that in the rule, we have musts, we have shalls. There's a lot of shalls in the spend plan. So not must, they're shalls. Okay, this is the same spend plan that we looked at earlier. And I wanted to bring attention to the type of the here. And something what I picked up was interesting. And then this goes back to our staffing question. Because when you're doing fundraisers, a lot of times you're selling tax exempt baked goods, you're selling tax exempt, whatever have you. That's how you get around it a lot about. And so be careful because per the tax code, you can only use tax exempt sales for equipment and something else. Anyway, you cannot use it for staffing, which is listed here. So it's not, so just be careful. There's other rules. And that's what took us along on the other document was that your fundraising have more rules than just school fees. Question.
So charter schools, most of them are 501c3s, and then districts are governmental entities, and they have there's different rules with regard to tax exempt sales.
Yes. Tax exempt sales. This is, I believe you're still, the 501c would have to still apply by that. And you're right, you know what? I will look that back up because it might have been specific. If I go back up in the code, it might be specific to, but it said LEA to schools. So it would be caught under both parts, both LEA.
Yeah, I just know on the sales tax exemption side, a couple of years ago, we had some direction from the state charter school board that after digging into it was just a very gray area.
I'll look up, because I'll go back to this code. I left the reference here, but I'll go back and see if it's talking specifically. But I think if it's talking specifically about local governmental schools in this, which is.
But we're 501c3s as well. So we file out our tax return under a 501c3, not under a
governmental entity.
Yeah.
But it still calls out not just governmental entities, but local educational agency. So we might get caught on both sides of that. But I'll go back and research.
Yeah, we get to know exactly.
Okay, and I'll work with the state charter board. But I will. Charity left me. I'll make a note. That's a good one. I need to research.
I had another question, backtracking a few slides. So on the non-waivable fees, you had college credit courses that are non-waivable. But then in the directors meeting 2 weeks ago, Charity mentioned that the textbooks are waivable. So why would the college credit course be non-waivable and then you have to waive the textbook fee for those courses?
Okay, it's right here. So a double I. They only charge a fee for a textbook required for advanced placement or described in section 5010-302, a concurrent enrollment fee. So
I listened to that recording. I kept rewinding it.
Yeah.
And I made notes. And we were in that meeting told that CE, AP, and Chromebooks are all considered textbooks and can be a fee, but is waivable. So I'm guessing it's not waivable for those.
You're right, because it's not only just it's a fee, but then you get under that section 8, and I don't have the code right me, but the talk about non-waivable, it calls them out as an exceptional to that too. So I will get you both of them. But yes, I believe that they are. You can charge a fee, and they are non-waivable. But that's section 8 of the 407. I just want to pull that out. I don't know if you got. Yeah. So she'll look at that. I think it's.
So I'm not changing anything yet.
Yeah, don't change anything yet.
But with AP, there's funding that can support you
A little bit.
pay for the students. Access
not
to
enough.
those classes.
Very little.
Yeah, correct. Correct.
Okay, is it 407-8?
I didn't, sorry, I'm trying to just take notes on it.
Okay, all right. I'll get back to you on that, but I think you're right. There's two sections to look at separately on that. Okay. All right. We are humming right along, taking more time than we thought we would today. So I had one more section to talk about, and that was what to expect on monitoring going forward. But
Angie's online and she says 53G-7-602 in response to the textbook.
okay,
Talks about AP and CE textbooks for the next year, 2022 to 23. So that might be the reference to look up 53G-7-602.
okay. All right, we'll look that up and get that back to you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, monitoring. Okay, so we've been doing lots of presentations, new documents. I think there's probably, I counted up one time, there's over 1,000 pages of guidance documents on our website, and all of this was what we've been doing the last 2 years. We had anticipated jumping in and doing some actually on-site monitoring. We realized there's only 2 of us, 3 of us. We added a lot of the monitoring into the agreed upon procedures for the Office of State Auditors. So you all may have gotten a lot more questions from your audit, your financial audit about school fees, and it moved from chapter 3 to chapter 2 or vice versa. And so it's going to be checked every year by your internal CPA firms. Okay, so we did add a lot more to that to kind of lessen the burden on us here. But basically what we came up with, we thought we could do as a staff here would be a 5-year cycle for all those that are greater than 10,000 students. And, you know, what are we gonna do? We're gonna come visit the LEA, and we'll also visit 5% of the schools within that. So a minimum of an elementary and a secondary. And then on a 10-year cycle would be those less than 10,000. And then the same thing, we would visit at least one of the schools with that, along with the LA. So that's our anticipated, our policy or our schedule, our procedure on that we'll be doing. And with that, there also can move up on the schedule. You remember we did that risk rating along with your school that we gave you with the performance metrics, and that if you get moved up on that, and I'll talk a little bit more about it here in a minute, and well, let me just go next slide. Okay, this is Barbie's part. This is why I'm stumbling. I apologize. Didn't have as much practice on it. All right, so we did do an assessment, overall assessment risk score of greater than 5, might move you up on the schedule. And that is, if your average cost of your school fees is higher than the state, we assess that risk. The LEA percentage of eligible students that's not participating is higher than the statewide. The calls from parents and guardians. And then we did this risk assessment that we sent out with the performance metrics last March. And so we'll do that again. So this could, if getting a score up above 5, could move you into high risk category. Now, we would not do, if we got you on the 5-year schedule, we wouldn't just come next year and do a high risk, okay? So, but this is part of that scheduling or what we determine how we're gonna do the schedule. So just so you know, it's not arbitrary capricious. That's what Perry Mason always says, just arbitrary. So we do have a set procedure on determining where and how.
When did that risk assessment get sent out?
It was last March with the performance. We can send it out again. And we'll be doing a new one as soon as we get this set of certificates and stuff done. It's kind of our dry run, our practice run last time. So we'll have it again this after the October reports this year. We'll do the same thing.
And it was sent out to all of the superintendents and charter directors.
So
and we pass that on to them.
if you want, just drop us a line and I'll send it right back out to you.
Okay.
Okay.
I know one thing Barbie had reiterated is if you pull up as a high risk on this assessment and you're scheduled for monitoring that year, it will just be combined into the one. And so you're not going to have double, you would just have the one time.
And then 5 years later, you, but you're not gonna get every year.
Right now, you may have, if there is something that's high risk in between that, so maybe 2 years, 2 or 3 years, if there's something that triggers it, would they not have one partway through that?
It depends on, that high risk assessment, it would be very difficult to hit that actually, so.
That's what I'm saying, because what if you always come up high risk every year?
Well, every
Because-
year then we'll just.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't make sense.
Then there's a
No,
bigger
yeah.
issue.
There's a bigger issue. There's a different issue than school fees, yes. So anyway, the areas that will come review will be your policies, of course, because that's what we love as auditors, policies. And then we'll also be looking, we'll verify the fee policies and schedules were submitted to compliance, the Open Public Meetings Act, and so forth, and looking for they were approved before April 1st, even though you can amend it afterwards. We'll kind of be looking for those things, but all of that we can do prior to coming out to an on-site visit. And so there's, but we'd also be looking for the school materials, receive the proper notification, the fee waivers. The reason we need to come out to school is because we need to do more of that fee waiver, not the county stuff, but the fee waiver process, administering process of that. Do you have somebody set up? Do they know their responsibilities? Are they working and talking? Are they keeping, the log of the applications and the denials and looking through that stuff? So that's what we would do. So a lot of this will be done on beforehand as much as possible, so we're not spending a lot of time on site with schools. And so again, the areas that we would review: are you in elementary? Are you putting when you send out a supply list, are you putting that, that wording, that specific wording in the code? We look at the administration of school fees. We will be looking at the county process, but of that, we can do a lot of it from here, especially with your PIFs and what's coming there. So we'll be doing that from a distance. The camps and clinics, we talked a little bit about that, the fundraisers. That's probably the one we get the most calls about in the spring is the camps and clinics. So we'll be looking at that. And also just your annual staff training. So if you're doing the training, you're talking about school fees, I don't know if you keep logs or how you do that training, but maybe just some record notation of how that's being done.
So what is your requirement on the annual staff training? That for all the principals? Is that
Yeah,
for
it's
administrative assistants? Is that, who's that for?
in the code, it just says that you're training annually the staff. It's the
Staff that are involved with school fees
staff
administration.
involved school fee administration.
Not teachers that are.
It's basically who's handling the waiver applications.
Unless there's a training needed for teachers. So if you have teachers that are assigning fees that shouldn't be, like, yes, pull them into a training. Make sure that they know the regulations and understand that. So if they're charging students a fee that is not on the fee schedule, you want to train that teacher. Does that make sense?
That just wouldn't happen. Because
Good,
because all the fees come to the main office, and so that's what I'm thinking is it all
We
the,
hope they're all come to the house.
well, if they're not, then we have a bigger problem.
Right.
But would it be just the administrative assistant and then she can, or he can then distribute it to the,
The goal is to make sure that the LEA is providing that. So your staff are receiving their annual training, they're aware of the regulations. If you have things specific to your LEA, you're covering those. So because you have your own policies and procedures that you guys have decided on for your population. And then there's the regulations and code of rule. And so making sure that they're receiving the training on that. And so if you've got the administration that's overseeing the teachers, and they're the ones, the administration would need to be trained so they can let the teachers know. So long as you have recording, hey, this is happening, these are the individuals that are attending, here's what we trained on. Awesome.
You guys, I imagine school fees is only one part of a larger training that you're not doing. You don't have to have a separate.
Right.
But it's just as part of your usual training for these people. All right, and that wraps up the questions. We do owe the chat, the recording, so that will be out there. Let us know if you have specific questions. Some people come to ask, we ask to chat, we're happy to chat with you. afterwards here if you need to, we will be here. And so does anyone have another question of the benefits of the group? Online. We surely appreciate you guys coming here today. It makes it so much easier for the live audience and to interact. And so appreciate you being here, appreciate you being online. There has been a lot of great strides made in school fees, and we just got this last year, or these last few regulations coming on, and they're a big lift. It's a huge lift, and I'm excited for the legislative session to see. I know school fees will be there because they're asking for some money for the curriculum fees. So I look forward to what happens.